What's up, everybody? In today's video, we're gonna dispel a rumor. We're gonna touch on why XRP is more than just a chart. We're gonna talk about how this can play out in your portfolio. And we're also going to talk about how you can position yourself for success. So if all that sounds good, go ahead and hit that like button. Consider subscribing and let's jump into the video. Okay, so let's start with the rumor. We've got to dispel. And basically, it has the idea that XRP is some sort of speculative asset that has no underlying real-world utility. That's simply not true. So we want to go over what XRP does, why it does it, and then touch on why that matters. So let's start with the what and the why. So basically, XRP is a bridge currency. It's a way to get from one currency to another quickly, cheaply, and transparently. So, we know that the global economy runs on currency exchange. So, the problem is, how do we move those currencies around the world east? Well, with Swift, it takes 2 to 3 days, and it's very expensive. With Ripple's on-demand liquidity, which is the ODL, they take a couple of minutes, and they're much cheaper. And additionally, there's no middlemen involved. You don't have to rely on correspondent banking. It's basically a decentralized system. So that's the what. That's what XRP does. It helps bridge the gap between different currencies. Now, the how is very important as well. And basically, when you send an XRP transaction, you're sending it across a consensus network. And with this consensus network, you have multiple validators. You have multiple entities. You have multiple people looking at the same thing, validating the same thing. And that gives you a certain level of trust and transparency that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. So you don't have to rely on a central authority. You don't have to rely on a middleman bank. Basically, you can trust the network. So that's the how. And then finally, why would you use XRP to begin with? Well, there are 2 main reasons. First is speed. Again, with Swift, it takes 2 to 3 business days. With ODL, it takes a couple of minutes. Additionally, it's also cheap. So if you're moving a small amount of money, it may not make sense to use Swift or a middleman bank because their fees are so high. They have minimums and they'll charge you extra. So with XRP, you don't have those pain points anymore. You can move small amounts of money quickly and cheaply. And it's those 2 things, speed and cost, that really drive the majority of the use cases for XRP. It's really straightforward. But let's jump back into today's video. Now that we know the what, the how, and the why of XRP, let's touch on why this matters, why we're talking about this, and why you should care. Well, since the beginning of the year, we've seen a lot of selling pressure in the crypto market. We've also seen selling pressure specifically in the XRP market. Now, some of this comes from FUD. Some of this comes from a lack of understanding. And some of this comes from the fact that XRP is very much a project in progress. So it's not surprising that we see these types of things happen. However, if we zoom out a little bit and we look at the bigger picture, we start to see that the fundamentals behind XRP are still extremely strong. So first, we have to understand that the majority of XRP, that S being traded, right, now is not actually used for the use case that we just talked about. So the use case we just talked about, getting from one currency to another quickly, cheaply, and transparently, that's only a small portion of what's happening in the market right now. Instead, a huge chunk of XRP trading right now is pure speculation. People buying it because they think it's going to go up in price, selling it because they think it's going to go down in price. But that's not the point of the asset, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. The point of the asset is to facilitate currency exchange, to fix broken systems, to fix slow systems, to fix expensive systems. And as long as we keep that in mind, we have to believe that eventually the market will understand that as well. Second, and this is a big one, we're starting to see a lot more regulatory clarity when it comes to XRP. This is huge. This means that we're going to see more institutions adopt it. We are going to see more exchanges listed, and we are going to see more money flow into XRP. One example of this is the recent news that the SEC has decided not to appeal the case. The case where they were telling XRP that they weren't a security, they were telling the market that they weren't a security. And this is huge because, again, it brings more legitimacy to the space, it brings more legitimacy to and it shows the world that this can be adopted by institutions. It can be adopted by exchanges, and it can be used for everyday transactions. This leads us to our third point, which is that even though the price may be down, the development is not. So when we look at the development activity, when we look at the number of commits, when we look at the number of pull requests, when we look at the ecosystem partners, when we look at the partnerships that Ripple is forging, when we look at all of that stuff, it's clear that this project is moving forward at full steam. They're not slowing down. In fact, they seem to be speeding up. There are more and more companies that are using XRP. There are more and more companies that are partnering with Ripple, and that will continue. It seems okay. That's it for me today. You guys, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.